a dragon. I swear I saw a dragon, a green and seething, fire-breathing monster is in sight, with eyes of red, a lion's head, and wings as dark as night. Oh, he has a jaw of gleaming teeth.
Dear everyone, yes, you are here. It's time for Sunday School Bonanza, a This Week in Mormons production. You can be with us at thisweekinmormons.com. Be with us on Facebook, though, as well. So where you can, argue with people in a very effective, constructive social media type way where people are totally swayed by other people's opinions and change their mind about things.
And you can like them.
Yeah. Anyway, but honestly, we put out good stuff and we enjoy you being with us on all that. So join us there and all blah, blah, blah. I do the plugs at the beginning now when I do this. And that wonderful voice you heard, those dulcing tones, are from Patricia Doxey.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Welcome back. Nice to have you. This will be, of course, Patricia's last lesson on the year. We've only got one more New Testament lesson after this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why there's only 46 when typically we should have 48 Sundays of gospel doctrine. The other manuals have 48 lessons. For some reason,
really?
This one got drops to.
Even because of,
There's no explanation why.
No explanation.
No. I don't know why. But anyway, we're getting into some heady material this week, and I hope we can do it justice, for I am no theologian. My understanding is limited, but I always enjoy doing this because I learn things as I do it, and hopefully you can have the same experience, whether you are teaching, attending, or other. We are tackling the book of Revelation, the first part of the book of Revelation.
Right, and of course next week will be the wrap-up.
Next week will be more, Armageddon and a lot of those vision parts of it. This part of Revelation is very interesting, and in preparing for this lesson, I've learned quite a bit. Because I'm kind of a naif, I guess, on the book of Revelation in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk about are a number of things, but specifically instructions to some of the ancient churches in Asia Minor, present-day Turkey. And a lot of the remarks are just sort of what John frames and says to all of them and how it affects us in our day.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting because it's much more literally taken, and it's the only part of Revelation that's written in similar fashion to a Pauline epistle, like, hey,
right,
figure this out. Maybe not as direct as Paul. Obviously, there's a lot of metaphorical language in the book of Revelation. Because then after that, it all pivots and it becomes much more about the future and about what we can,
right.
The rest of the book, of course. But these first handful of chapters, a little bit different. For some background, though, before we get into that, I almost forgot. So we understand the book to have been written by John the Beloved, the same John who walked with Christ. That's our latter-day understanding, and I guess I take that for granted as a Mormon. I assume that everyone knows it's like John the Beloved wrote it, and a lot of depictions show that John is the one who will receive it, but it's still a matter of scholarly debate in other circles, just
right,
because the writer only says that he's John.
Right. So some take it to just be another follower named John. Some people even argue that it's John the Baptist,
who wrote it while exiled on Patmos before he was beheaded.
Right.
I don't know how that works out.
I don't know, but we generally take it as John the Beloved.
Yeah, that's what we understand anyway. And so
I was just were you gonna talk about what the word apocalypse
a few things, and I was gonna say, for reference, Patmos. When I grew up, I always thought it was gonna be like some really isolated island. It's an island like in between Turkey and Greece and the Aegean Sea.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like St. Helena with Napoleon or anything, folks, which, by the way, look up St. Helena if you want to see true isolation. That's where he was exiled because he was preaching the word of Christ, and they said, no, can't do that. Emperor worship had become a thing during this era, and the church was suffering. People were apostatizing. There were a lot of bad fronts going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said before, Patricia, why do we call it Revelation? Because a lot of other languages don't even call it the book of Revelation. And its Greek name of the book is actually Apocalypsis.
Right.
So
it's actually interesting that a lot of people don't not a lot of people, but certain sects don't even consider Revelations part of their canonical works, because it's a little far out there. But when you read it all together and unpack some of the symbols and really look into it, you can see how the book of Revelations teaches you a lot about Christ and a lot about Christ's kingdom. And so the word apocalypse, as we were talking about before, doesn't just mean the end, or doesn't mean the end of the world, which is how we take it.
Yeah,
but
of course.
it comes, it basically means to make something unhidden, or to take off the veil, or to uncover something. So it's talking
to reveal, as it were. Okay.
So it's talking about future events and about the kingdom of God, coming to the earth. It also references the war in heaven, so that's an interesting doctrinal point for Mormons, especially. It begins and it talks about how John's instructed to record the revelation he receives from the Lord through an angel. And then the lesson talks about several different symbols. And actually, if you turn to the Institute manual, it has a really interesting list of different symbols.
And it goes into it in a much nicer way. This is, if you're teaching this lesson in particular, I highly encourage referring to the New Testament Institute manual, not the New Institute manuals that are terrible, but the old one that's now... BYU changed their curriculum. Anyway, so refer to the New Testament Institute manual. Go to the very end there. Look for Revelation chapters 1 through 3. And you find a lot of really, really good information. And the lesson covers the same stuff, but I find that this perhaps presents it in a more digestible format to kind of come to an understanding.
A chart. Because when you think of, it's basically a religious fairy tale. If you think of like Little Red Riding Hood, it could be a little bit scary. You're talking about, wolves eating people and stuff like that.
Love those Grimm brothers.
But, it has a moral. And it's the same. There's a lot of different symbols, and they might be scary or kind of weird when you aren't thinking about what they mean. But taking a look at what these symbols mean can help you understand how Revelations is actually a really hopeful book in talking about how we can overcome evil.
And it really is. I agree with you there. I think the tenor around the book is often very, doom and gloom kind of thing. But it's not. It's a hopeful book that guides us. And so there's all this symbolism here, and I love symbolism because it's rich. It teaches us in different ways. And, another things we see. John sees a number of things here. Let's see. We don't have to hit every single one, but kings and priests, which means those who receive exaltation in the celestial kingdom. He also sees, Alpha and Omega, which of course is Christ, the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet. And then we see 7 candlesticks. So that's very interesting. It's a very specific thing. Because I would see kings and priests and other things kind of going along with what just kind of fits. What does 7 candlesticks have to do with anything? What does that mean, Patricia? So
the 7 candlesticks represent branches of the church. And Bruce R. McConkie has a comment about how branches today act as candlesticks. He says, candlesticks carry light. They do not create it. Their function is to make it available, not to bring it into being. So by using 7 candlesticks to portray the 7 churches to whom John is now to give counsel, the Lord is showing that his congregations on earth are to carry his light to the world.
Okay. And for reference, because all of these 7 churches are all in what's basically modern day Western Turkey.
Right.
Okay. And I've read some interesting comments on why that? Why? Surely there were branches all over the place. And we don't know anything for sure. Some wonder if they'd all apostatized or if John was just most familiar with these because he was based out of Ephesus beforehand. And maybe he just this was sort of like his stake in a way, in a sense. So there are these 7 branches. But like you said, it represents all of us today.
Right. And how the branches or the organization of the church can bring the gospel of Christ to people.
And of course, then he sees the Lord, though. And where is the Savior in the midst of this revelation?
Well, he's in the midst of the candlesticks.
Yeah, so you see, if you visualize Jesus and then the 7 candlesticks surrounding him, which is very interesting.
He also talks about stars, referencing, and the stars represent angels, or the Joseph Smith translation changes it to servants, showing that the stars represent the leaders of the 7 branches of the church.
Which is also interesting. And of course, we have that today. We have modern day prophets and leaders and people we should trust into. And also, the Institute Manual makes a very good point here to say, not only were the 7 stars, Christ was holding them in his right hand. And the right hand is very symbolic as far as covenant making and things like that. And that was also all part of that. I really like that. Then what comes out of the mouth of Christ?
A sword.
A sword just comes out of the mouth, like David Blaine. That's a magician.
Oh, got
for
it.
all you
got
listeners.
It.
Okay. That's interesting. What does that mean?
So the word of the Lord is often compared to a sword. It's also in the New Testament referred to as a sword of truth. And in Doctrine and Covenants section 6, it talks about, "Behold, I am God. Give heed unto my word, which is quick and powerful, sharper than a two-edged sword, to dividing asunder of both joints and marrow. Therefore, give heed unto my words."
Interesting. So I like that it's a sword that can pronounce judgment, but it also frees the innocent. Like by the power of the
Oh, that's
sword,
true.
the chains, the shackles of sin and of Satan can be destroyed in that sense as well, and that's through Christ. And then likewise through Christ, John also sees the keys of hell and of death. And that's a two-parter.
Yeah.
So those keys unlock the doors or overcome spiritual death, hell, and physical death because, death.
Right.
Right. A little bit more self-explanatory.
Yeah, so we're used to the symbol of keys and how the priesthood can open doors, but yeah, it's using that symbol again. So the next section, we've been mentioning the 7 branches a lot, and this next section, like Jeff talked about at the beginning, are specific advice. It contains specific advice that are given to these people to overcome their weaknesses that each branch has. So it's a lot of personalized information.
Okay, so we can work through these quickly, I guess. And I think as a teacher, I don't know if you might want to go through all 7 of them. You might want to pick and choose. Kind of depends on the need. And also another place where I like this Institute manual a lot, there's another good chart where we show the church or the city where it is. There's a description of Jesus Christ within the verses that pertain to that counsel. And then John gives them praise and commendation, and then he also offers correction and counsel and then makes promises. And to each of these 7 branches, they receive different... I don't know. For some reason, I see a lot of parallels with Alma talking to his 3 sons.
Oh,
in the
yeah,
Book of
that's
Mormon.
true.
I don't know. But you see that. There's praise, there's correction, and there are promises. And that's a model that we can take as leaders in the church and in callings that we have in the way that we can also instruct and help and edify others and help them overcome their natural weaknesses.
So the overall message of each of this advice is comes from the title of the lesson, which "He that overcometh shall inherit all things." He's really trying to teach these groups that, hey, you have these weaknesses, but you also have strengths, and don't let tribulation trip you up, but continue on your journey towards Christ.
Yeah.
Is there any advice to any of the branches that sticks out to you from the manual?
Let's see. I like that. I think is it Pergamos that gets some of the stuff that's very temple focused, or is that Thyatira? Like, I'm totally saying these really well, folks. I totally minored in Greek studies, as you well know. I'll just look up temple here. Temple Sardis talks about temple.
Got it.
Temple ordinances. I think that one's very cool because it's a bit distinct. He talks about people being dressed in white and being pure in that sense. Also, the very interesting thing is, according to the Institute manual, Sardis was a crossroads of 5 major highways, and it had a great reputation for great wealth and low moral standards. So I think the juxtaposition there of that with, hey, be a temple-going people is a good reminder for us to not be worldly and to keep our focus where it should be. Also interesting is that apparently Philadelphia was a minor, insignificant, like throwaway type city.
Oh.
Yeah. And so there's actually no, he basically has no full-blown correction for them. He has praise, and he tells them to be strong.
Okay. But kind of glosses over it.
Yeah, it just says, resist temptation, keep it going. And then I like the ones to Laodicea.
Perfect.
That he condemns them because they were lukewarm and neither cold nor hot. I think that's a fascinating way to describe the stasis perhaps we can experience in our own discipleship if we're not careful.
And the lesson asks, how can we increase our commitment to the gospel of Jesus Christ, and how might we spiritually be sometimes lukewarm? So it asks us to think about how we can be more committed.
And also interesting, he offered no praise for them.
No praise.
Just some correction. So thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot. Buy of me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayest be rich. Anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayest see. And he mentions the eye salve. Mm-hmm. That's also that was an ointment, and that was because there was actually a medical school in Laodicea, and they developed this thing. And so he's John is well aware of the science of things going on and what this town's famous for. And how that relates to the Savior. And of course, it's all the revelation given to him. So it's fascinating. It shows that prophets can know things. The Lord knows his flock, wherever he may be. A lot of good stuff here.
So the next section and the last section talks about, starts the revelation the more revelation-y part of the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
And dragons, war in heaven. And he also talks about how the war in heaven, or the battle between good and evil, people using their agency, continues on the earth today. It also talks about the government that will exist on the earth during Jesus Christ's millennial reign. So some of these events have already happened, some of them haven't. But I think one of the main takeaways and how it applies to our life is that is summarized in a Wilford Woodruff quote. And he says, there are two powers on the earth and in the midst of the inhabitants of the earth, the power of God and the power of the devil. When God has had a people on the earth, it matters not in what age, Lucifer, the son of the morning, and the millions of fallen spirits that were cast out of heaven have warred against God. And he exhorts us to follow the Lord and perform his work.
Which I happen to agree with.
Good.
But it does say, the other way we can overcome this, we didn't get to this exactly right.
Revelation 12:11. Yeah,
blood and testimony.
Mm-hmm.
Two very interesting things. We can only overcome the buffeting of Satan through the blood of Christ, and of course through our own personal testimonies.
Right.
That's really, really valuable. I mean, it's easy to overlook that because, of course, we need our Savior, but we need to be strong enough ourselves and do everything we can do to overcome the temptations of the adversary. For he is like a dragon, or even like a hydra. I mean, he's
right.
He knows how to try to trip us up, and the only way to overcome that is through the atonement of Christ. I actually like a quote from Elder Scott. A strong testimony gives peace, comfort, and assurance. It generates the conviction that as the teachings of the Savior are consistently obeyed, life will be beautiful, the future secure, and there will be capacity to overcome the challenges that cross our path. A testimony grows from understanding truth distilled from prayer and the pondering of scriptural doctrine. It is nurtured by living those truths in faith and the secure confidence that the promised results will be obtained. Your personal security and happiness depend upon the strength of your testimony, for it will guide your actions in times of trial and uncertainty. Anything stick out to you there, Patricia?
I was just thinking about how it is reassuring because, I think with just all the violence that's happening, specifically I'm thinking about the gun violence that's happening. Sure. It can get me a little freaked out, and I can think about like all the hard things that is happening. But I think what this quote is teaching me is that I need to focus on the good things in the community and improving the bad things in my community, and not get so freaked about the global wars, but fight the battles in front of me and work on making the lives and the situations around me better, and focus on the positive.
I can respect that. I think it's a good note to go out on. I don't have to have the last word here. I think you've done a great job. So here we are, this first part of Revelation. Read up, study it up. I think there's a lot of good stuff to learn here. And next week we will finish out the back part of the book with some of the other stuff there. And then that's it for the New Testament, everybody. It's been a good year. Patricia, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What a delight. And thank you all for tuning in. We very much appreciate it, because without you listeners, there's no point in doing this. My vanity really only has such lengths. I can only do so much. So thanks for listening to Sunday School Bonanza, everyone. We hope you have a great Sunday.